Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. Today I'm doing an original tag which I'm really excited to be doing. It's an idea I had a while ago and I'm now excited to give it a try and see what you guys think. It is the school days book tag. That'd be a good idea if I could get my words out today. The school days book tag. And yes, I'm aware of the irony of releasing a book tag about being at school when the schools are closed in the UK currently. But hopefully you guys will think it is fun, and yeah, let's get into it. So as you guys must know, if you don't know, you must be new to my channel, so hello and welcome. I am training to become an English teacher and I had this idea. So the idea is that it's structured around the school day. There are 6 questions that are the time of day questions. Everything will be linked in the description for you to see. And then we've got 11 subject questions. So what I would like you to do is definitely to answer the times of day questions, and then you can choose whichever subject you like from the others. So you could have, you know, the 6 times of day questions and then 6 subjects or 3 subjects or whatever you want to do. Make it as long or as short as you like, and just play around with it and have fun. I will be running through all of the prompts obviously so you can see how they work, and yeah, let's do it. So first of all, I've got my laptop screen here with the questions on because there is no way I will remember all of the prompts. That's just not going to happen. So first of all, I've got times of day followed by the subjects, but when you do it you can structure it however you like. Okay, so times of day. First, Belle, tell us about the book that first got you into reading. So I have talked about this book quite a few times before, but that book is The Borrowers by Mary Norton. I really like this edition. It's really cute. This book just sparked my imagination as a kid. I've always been a big reader, and I was raised reading classic books. And this was kind of the first kids book I can remember reading, and I remember absolutely devouring it. I had it in a massive binder. It had a dark blue cover and it was huge, with all of the Borrower stories in because it's a series, and I just remember reading and rereading and rereading that edition until it literally fell apart. And yeah, this just sparked my imagination, and I loved the idea that there was this kind of unseen world going on next to ours. And if you don't know, The Borrowers is about the borrowers. They are tiny people that live in this story. They live under the kitchen floor, and it's about them being seen by a human being, what they call a human being, who lives in the house, and adventures ensue. And it's just so lovely, and it's got lovely messages about family and friendship. And yeah, that is the book that got me into reading. So, break time. Which book have you most recently had to take a break from or DNF? So the last book that I DNF'd was at the end of 2020, and that was The Wives by Taran Fisher. I think it was either November or December. I will find the wrap up and put it in the description, the link in the description. I DNF'd that book at about 70 pages in because it was just really offensive and really poorly written. And like I said, you can go and see my full thoughts on that in that video. Charlotte from Books and Bargains warned me that it was bad. I still went ahead and read it anyway, or tried to, and just could not get past the first 70 pages. It was just really poorly written. There was some horrible mental health representation, even in the short section that I read. And then I asked Charlotte to spoil it for me, and it did not get better. So yeah, that was the last book that I had to definitely DNF. I don't usually take breaks from books. I'm either reading it or I'm not. I'm not one to like have a book on my currently reading for months and months. Obviously that's a personal choice and everyone can do what they like, but I personally am either in or out. So yeah, that's the last book that I DNF'd. Lunchtime. Tell us about your favourite book that features food. I love a book that features food. If there's like really great food descriptions in a book, I'm really very likely to pick it up. And the last one of those I read and enjoyed was Hungry Hearts, which is edited by Elsie Chapman and Caroline Tung Richmond. This was gifted to me by Charlotte for Christmas, and it is a collection, it's a YA collection of 13 short stories that are all interconnected, all set on Hungry Hearts Row, which is this street in America, and it's all focused around food. And there are some really, really big topics covered in these stories, so I need to give content warnings for grief, suicidal thoughts, depression. I think that was it, but there's some really big things that are covered, but it's all kind of wrapped up in food, so there's something really comforting about it. I would say be careful what time of day you read this because it's had me craving so many foods in here, but yeah, I really thoroughly enjoyed this. One of them takes a really dark turn, which we know I love, that I did not see coming. And yeah, if you're looking for a short story collection and you've never read one before, I would say this is a really easy and accessible one. Some short story collections can get kind of weird. This is not, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. Final bell, which book have you most recently finished reading? So at the time of filming this, the last book I read was Perfect Prey by Helen Fields, which again I think was gifted to me by Charlotte. Yes, it was. This is the second book in the D.I. Luke Kalanick series. So the first book is Perfect Remains, which I read at the start of 2019, I think, and I was gifted this book and finally picked it up this month. It is a police procedural set in Edinburgh, and in this one Kalanick is hunting a serial killer who is killing people in very public ways. This is very, very gory, so if you can't handle like really dark stuff, don't pick this up. However, if you really like people like Karen Slaughter, I would recommend this one because it's very much on the same level, and I really enjoyed it. I think I gave it 4 stars, so yeah, really enjoyed this one. Homework. What was the last non-fiction book that you read and enjoyed? I really enjoy reading non-fiction. I have a lot of it on my TBR. The non-fiction book that I'm currently reading, which is over there, is Know My Name by Chanel Miller, which I'm about 100 pages into so far, and it's really quite harrowing reading, but I am enjoying it. However, I think the first non-fiction book that popped into my head when I read this prompt, because I wrote these prompts ages ago and then parked it because I had school and everything else, so I only just looked at these again today, so I feel like it almost feels like it's written by someone else. So anyway, the first one that popped into my head was The Five by Hallie Rubenhold. This was stunning. It was so, so good. As you can see on here, it says the untold lives of the women killed by Jack the Ripper. I enjoy reading some true crime, but I do have a problem with true crime that focuses on the perpetrator instead of the victims. And this does the opposite of that. This is looking at the 5 women as women. And it looks at their history, the family history, where they came from, the things that happened to them through their lives. It is also very much a social commentary on Victorian London at the time, Victorian England, and how these women came to be so vulnerable that they ended up crossing paths with Jack the Ripper. And yeah, I just think this is such a powerful book, and the amount of research that's gone into this book is just mind-boggling. And I came away really feeling like I knew each of the women as individuals, and yeah, obviously it does feature how they died because that is part of their story, but it's very much fade to black, and so it kind of leads up to their deaths and then fade to black, and then it comes back up and looks at the effect on their family and their community and where they were buried. So it really doesn't give any oxygen to Jack the Ripper. It's very, very much about these 5 women, and yeah, I just thought it was so well done, and I would definitely recommend it. It's not particularly gory because it doesn't really go into their injuries, so yeah, I would really recommend this, and if you've been thinking about picking it up, do it because it's fantastic. And then staff room, this is the last time of day. Tell us about a book that you go to when you need to take a breath, because trust me, there are teachers up and down this country right now who go into their staff room and even more than ever are going because it's a time to be teaching. So for me, I always go back to children's classics. So I've got here The Secret Garden by Frances Hodgson Burnett, which is in this beautiful edition. I love these editions. You can see up here there's a couple missing because there's another one I'm going to talk about in a minute. Who gifted me this one? Oh, this was from Kerry Louise Reads on Instagram. And yeah, I just love these editions. So yeah, I always go back to children's classics if my brain is feeling a bit overwhelmed. This is one that I love, and let's just try and tilt it. There we go. Yeah, this is one that I really love. This is about a little girl who is brought to India to live with her uncle after her parents die, and she finds a secret garden. It's very much about grief and life and kind of coming back to yourself after grieving, and I just love it. And yeah, for me, a children's classic is always the way to go if I'm a little bit like, ooh, stressed. Okay, so those are all of the times of day questions. We're now going to get into the subjects, and like I said, you can pick and choose which subjects you want to do. I'm just going to move the screen so I can see. Yeah, you can pick and choose whichever subjects you like. You can do all of them, you can pick a couple. It's entirely up to you. So first of all, English. Obviously I had to put English first. Tell us about one book you studied at school and recommend one book that you would like to add to the curriculum. So a book that I studied at school is another one of these beautiful editions, and that is Macbeth by William Shakespeare. This copy I think was from Brews and Reviews. Yes, it was, because it's the one that came without a note. So Macbeth is also known as the Scottish play, and it tells the story of a man called Macbeth who meets the witches. You can see on the front cover here, and he it's foretold that he will become king, and so he decides to make that happen by murdering the current king, Duncan, and things go from there, and it's a tragedy, so everyone dies at the end. There's a very high body count in this one. That is a book that most people will study at school. It is on the GCSE curriculum. It's a play that I love. It's a very complicated play. It's not a play I've had to teach yet, so I'm kind of intrigued to see what that's like. But as somebody who's read it, I very much enjoyed it, and yeah, that was a book that I studied at school. And then a book that I would put onto the curriculum, I've got loads of those, particularly books that I've read in the last 12 months, but the one that I've gone for is Don't Touch My Hair by Emma DeBerry. I've spoken about this book a lot, sorry, my back's sore today, which is why I keep shifting around. This is a book that I have talked about a lot on my channel since it was gifted to me for my birthday by Aoife at Words of Clover, and this is a non-fiction book in which Emma is looking at racism through the lens of hair. Emma is a black Irish woman, and she looks at the differences between black and European hair. She looks at the history of black hair and the things that slaves used to put codes into the way that they braided their hair, and maps and all kinds of things. Absolutely fascinating, and I just think this is a really important book, and it's also a really good way of starting the conversation about racism and being anti-racist. And it's an aspect of racism and the black experience that I had never thought about before, which is showing my white privilege, but I thought it was fascinating. It's also really accessible and really well written, and I would definitely put this onto the curriculum. Maths, how do you rate your books? Okay, so I haven't spoken about this for a little while. I did do a video at the start of last year, I think, but I was trying to think of a prompt for maths and obviously numbers, which made me think about ratings. So I, first of all, don't give half stars or quarter stars or anything like that. Also, obviously, rating books is a very personal thing, so usual booktuber disclaimer, this is just my thoughts. Yeah, I don't give half stars. A bit like putting a book down and coming back to it. I'm either in or I'm out, so a book is either 4 or 5 stars to me. So I don't give half stars. I very rarely give 1 star, because if a book is 1 star, I've probably DNF'd it. So for me, a 1 star would be really poorly written and offensive. A 2-star read I do occasionally give. That's my stomach growling. A 2-star will be a book that I finished but I didn't enjoy. 3-star is I finished it, it was okay, it was a perfectly good book, just didn't blow my socks off. A 4-star is I really loved it, but there was just that tiny thing missing. And then 5-star, it's perfect, I loved it, I want everyone to read it, I'm going to talk about it forever and ever and ever. Probably a new favourite author. So that is kind of my ranking. I have to say I don't take it that seriously, and some people might tell me off for that because I'm reviewing books on the internet, but for me it's kind of like, it's not something I put a massive amount of thought into, it's just how I feel when I get to the end of a book. It's not something I agonise over, and I do rate all books that I read. I know there are some book reviewers who, like, for example, wouldn't rate children's books, which is a totally valid way of doing it because they're not the target audience, but if I've read a book, I'm going to rate it. And with children's books, I will think about how I felt about it and also how I think it will translate to kids these days that are picking it up. So yeah, I rate everything that I read. I don't give half stars and I don't overthink it. I just go with what I'm feeling. Science, which book couple do you think has the best chemistry? For me, there was really only one answer for this, and that is the couple in Take a Hint, Danny Brown by Talia Hibbert. I loved this book. I think I put it in as one of my favourite books of the year or as a special mention, I can't remember, but I'll link that video in the description. So we've got Danny and Zaf in this book, and it is a fake dating trope. It is very steamy in places. I just loved it. It's a really great book anyway because it's got some really great mental health discussions and rep, and we get both perspectives of the 2 characters, and I loved their chemistry. And yeah, if you're looking for a book that is like sizzling hot chemistry, go with this one. Also the first book, because this is the Brown Sisters trilogy, Get a Life, Chloe Brown. I also love the chemistry between Chloe and Red in that book, but this one is just very slightly my favourite, just slightly edged it, and man, the chemistry in this book, whoa. Okay, Geography is up next. Describe a book that has a strong sense of place or great world building. So for this one I've gone with Psychology of Time Travel by Kate Mascarenius, which might be a weird one to choose, but it's my tag so I can do what I like. This one is a time travel book, obviously, as you would guess from the title, and it moves around in time a lot, but the reason I picked it for this prompt is I felt really secure all the time. I knew where I was, I knew what was happening. I think the world building is incredible. The way she sets up the time travel is so clever and I loved it. It's also got a murder mystery in it because it starts in 2018, I think, and a woman receives a death certificate in the post which is dated, I think, a year in the future, but it doesn't say who's died. It just gives their date of birth, so she knows it's an older woman that's died, and she's trying to work out what's happened, and it kind of all connects around that. I thought this was amazing. If you really like solid world building, and I guess this counts as sci-fi, which is not usually my thing, so it shows you how much I loved it. So yeah, that is the book that I would choose that. And also look at that cover. Oh yes. Right, history. Which 3 historical fiction novels have you most enjoyed? And if you don't read historical fiction, which areas of history would you like to learn more about? So I know I've asked for 3, but I've given 2. And then I'm going to talk about one area of history I'd like to learn more about. So my first, I've got loads of historical fiction novels I love, and actually there's a historical fiction novel that's coming later for a different question that would also fit for this. So the first one I had to go with is Dissolution by Cj Sampson. This is part of the first book in the Matthew Shardlake series. It is Tudor historical detective fiction, and in this one the dissolution of the monasteries is underway. Matthew Shardlake is a lawyer who is sent to investigate. No, he's sent to dissolve a monastery, and while he's there a murder takes place, and it then becomes kind of a race against time to find the murderer. It's also got a closed in setting because he gets stuck in a snowstorm while he's there. I love this whole entire series. I really want to do a ranking video actually at some point for these books. Would you guys be interested in that? I know it's kind of niche, but it's my channel, so I'll probably do it anyway. Yeah, I love these books because it is set in Tudor times, but it feels really modern, and there's a lot of discussion in these books about disability because Matthew has a twisted spine, and in this period of time he's referred to as a hunchback. So there's a lot of discussion around disability. There's loads of intrigue. It's always really fast paced. Some of the books get really big, but I never noticed how huge they were because I was just enjoying them so much. So yeah, if you're looking for an historical fiction series to get into, I would highly recommend this one. And then one other that I absolutely had to mention, and I know I've talked about it a lot since I read it at the end of last year, but it's gone straight into like my list of favourite historical fiction novels, and that is Hamlet by Maggio Farrell. This broke, like, when I say it broke my heart, it shattered it. This is based around the historical fact that Shakespeare had a son called Hamlet who died when he was 11, and it takes that historical fact and it builds this historical fiction novel around it, and we follow Hamlet's mother, his 2 sisters, and a little bit of his father as they grieve this little boy who has died. I do just want to warn you though, this is a plague novel. It starts in the plague, so just be aware, and they are, you know, social distancing basically and isolating and all kinds of things like that. And yeah, this absolutely blew my socks off. I loved it. It's quite a quiet novel. I've seen mixed reviews and I understand those mixed reviews. This isn't going to be for everyone. It's very literary fiction, but there was just something about it that just really got me in my chest. And yes, I just adored it. So if you have been thinking about picking this up or you've got it on your TBR, pick it up. I absolutely loved it. And again, look at that cover. Can you see a theme? Right, religious studies. Oh, and I was going to talk about an area of history you want to learn more about. So I put this in here in case you don't read historical fiction. So I do this thing where I get it in my head that I want to learn more about that area of something, and then I read loads about it, and then I don't go back to it for ages. But one of the things, for some reason, one of the historical figures that I really want to learn more about is Cleopatra, and I've got a book about her. I can't remember what it's called, but I'll put it in the description, on my wish list that is all about her, and that came recommended from Twitter because I asked ages ago if anyone knew of any like good books about Cleopatra, because there's loads out there, so it's really hard trying to work out like what's going to be actually well written and researched. She's just one of those figures from history that I know nothing about. I read Antony and Cleopatra at school which is the Shakespeare play, and I know nothing really about her, but she, you know, was clearly a very powerful woman, and I just find her really intriguing. So yeah, that is definitely one area of history I'm like aiming to read more about her this year. So if you have any recommendations for books about Cleopatra or that period of time, please drop me a comment and let me know. Okay, religious studies. Which book is the one that you always come back to? Do you guys want to guess which book I'm about to hold up? Maybe you can guess which edition, because we all know this is a book I have multiple editions of. Yes, it's The Handmaid's Tale by Margaret Atwood. I love this edition. Sprayed edges. Look at the end. Is this one with the end page? Yes, like look at this. It is just beautiful. And I will fully admit that I bought this book with no intention of reading it. Because I will mess it up. But it was just too beautiful for me to leave. And like, oh. Yes, I have many editions of this book. So, I talk about this book all the time on my channel, as you can see. Big Margaret Atwood fan. I have seen so many mixed reviews of this book, and I really understand the criticism of it, because it's quite a weird book, and the ending usually annoys people, but I love it. I know I've said this, I've talked about this a lot in videos before, so I'll try not to go on about it too much. I first read this when I was 16 and doing my A-levels, and it genuinely blew my mind. And I have owned up before in videos that I grew up in a very white, very middle class, privileged bubble. And before I read this book, I had never thought about feminism at all. And this just exploded that into my brain, and it kind of expanded my horizons massively. From this book, I've then gone on to read so much more feminist fiction and dystopian fiction, and just fiction and non-fiction from the perspective of people that aren't like me. And this was the start of it for me, and so that is why it's such an important book for me. It's a book I reread every year. I've probably read it, I don't know, 20 times by now. Studied at A-level. Studied at A-level, studied it in my undergrad degree, and I've just read and reread. And every time I reread it, I come away with something different, because every time I read it, I'm coming to it from a different time in my life, different angle, different perspective, and I just love it. So yeah, this is the book I always come back to. And in case you don't know, I should probably explain what it's about, just in case. It's a dystopian fiction set in a world called Gilead, where women's rights have been completely stripped. Women no longer have any rights, and in this society you are either a wife, a handmaid, or a Martha, and women have kind of been split into functions, and the handmaids are there to breed. They are forced to go through the ceremony each month. Each of the powerful men is given a handmaid, and the handmaid's job is to try and get pregnant by that man, and if she doesn't, she will be put to death. And it's this very brutal, very bleak world, and we are following Offred, who is one of the handmaids. And one of the criticisms that I see of this book is that the view of the world is very narrow, but to me that's the point, because we are in Offred's point of view. Like, she wouldn't know about other things that are going on. The whole point is that we're having her experience, and also I know that some people don't love the ending because it's very open, but I love this ending, and I think it's really cleverly done. So yeah, this was my first exposure to Margaret Atwood. Like I said, it really expanded my reading horizons and also just my worldview. So for me, this is always the book that I will come back to. Okay, PE, show us the biggest book on your TBR. So I had to literally go through and have a look at the page numbers on my TBR, and this is the biggest one, and I picked this one because she's heavy. This is The Secret Life of Mr. Ruse by Haken Nessa. Hopefully I've said that right. This was very kindly sent to me by Book Break, and yeah, she's big. She's over 500 pages. It's a big old hardback, which, as we know, is my favourite way to read, but she's heavy. And I think it's about a man that wins the lottery, and he thinks it's going to solve all his he thinks it's going to solve all of his problems, and then he moves to a cabin in the woods, and then a young woman arrives on his doorstep. Don't really know any more about it than that, and I don't want to, but it says on the front, one of Sweden's best crime writers. I'm really intrigued. I will be getting to this at some point soon, but yeah, that's definitely the biggest book on my TBR. PE we've just done. Music. Which reading format do you think has the best rhythm for reading? So you might be able to tell I struggled a little bit with finding a music question related to books. So reading formats. I personally prefer a physical book. I can't read off a screen. I'm just gonna have a drink of water because my throat's very dry after all this talking. Right. I personally can't or don't like reading off a screen. I borrowed my mother-in-law's Kindle when we went on honeymoon a couple of years ago, and it was fine, but I just didn't enjoy it quite as much as having a book. I definitely cannot refuse to read off my phone. I spend way too much time staring at my phone or a laptop screen as it is. I'm not going to read from that as well. So for me, my personal preference is a physical book. I do also enjoy audiobooks. I got into reading audiobooks in 2019 in a big way, and I still always have an audiobook on the go. But for me, my personal favourite is the good old-fashioned physical book. Drama, we've now got three left, by the way, so we're almost there. Which book do you think has the best ending? And even though I wrote this prompt, I read it and I was like, oh, that's really hard. So we've already talked about how much I love the ending of The Handmaid's Tale. I was looking through all of my books. It was just like, wow, this is actually a really hard question. But the book that I've chosen is Goodnight Mr. Tom by Michelle Magorian. I really love these editions, but because I'm quite hard on my books, it's quite scuffed, but I still love these editions. This is historical fiction, children's novel, children or YA. It's definitely the upper end of children, middle grade, and it's about a little boy who is evacuated during World War II, and he goes to live with Mr. Tom, who's this kind of grumpy old man who lives on his own, and it's about the relationship between the two of them. And this book is really harrowing in places, and I need to give a content warning for child abuse, and also death of an infant. There's a little bit of this, like loads of it is so lovely, and they're in the countryside, and it's all about William kind of coming out of himself and his relationship with Mr. Tom and him making friends, and Mr. Tom's got this really lovely dog, and then something happens and it gets really dark. But the thing that I love is the end. I feel like the end of this book is really realistic. It's really hopeful, and it's one of these books that always makes me sob because sad stuff happens, and then it makes me sob again because nice stuff happens at the very end. So yeah, really recommend this book. Art. Show us 3 books that you think have the best covers. So I talk all the time, I'm in loads of videos, I'm like, oh, look at this beautiful cover, and then I don't really talk about what I think makes a nice cover. So I wanted to put this question in, and it seemed to fit for art. So I looked through all of the covers on my bookshelves, and I've tried to choose like different genres, and I have, but the theme that runs through at least 2 of them, and some of the books I've already talked about whose covers I love. Basically, I like shiny things. Is what I enjoy in a cover. I like shiny covers. I like foiling. I'm definitely more of a kind of drawn to illustrated covers, although I do have one here that's got a photograph of a woman's face on it, so maybe that's not true. But shiny things and a nice spine, that's usually what I look for in a nice cover. So the first book that I've gone for is The Wrath and the Dawn by Renny Adea. I hope I said that right. This is a book that really surprised me last year. I read it, was it last year? Or was it the year before? I read it for Scooby-Doo-a-thon, maybe that was 2019, can't remember, but that was run by Simone and I. And one of the prompts, I think for Daphne, was a cover by, so I literally just went into Waterstones and just bought a book based on the cover alone, and I didn't really expect much from it, and then I loved it. I think it's a duology, but I'm too scared to read the second book in case like it's not as good, because I really enjoyed this one. But this cover is really beautiful, and like I said, you know, shiny bits, and just the colour palette's beautiful, the spine is beautiful. Like, I really need nice spines for my bookshelves, so that's what I look for. And then another book, which could also have come in the answer for the history question for me, is The Illumination of Ursula Flight by Anna Marie Crowhurst. I mean, I think this is probably my favourite book cover in my collection, because look at this. And like I said, this is historical fiction, which I highly recommend. But yeah, this kind of combines all the things that I like shiny bits, illustrations. Also, I like it when the cover really references the story, and this definitely does. You kind of have to read the story to understand all the different bits on the cover, and it's just stunning. And again, I mean, that spine is so lovely, although I quite often have this face out just because she's so pretty. And then the last one is a book that I chose because this is a book that like tends to have really awful covers, and I really love this edition of it, and that is Frankenstein by Mary Shelley. I mean, Frankenstein is notorious for having really ugly covers, but I feel like this one's really cool and it's really graphic, and it almost feels a bit kind of George Orwell with the big eye. Yeah, and again, I just love the cover, so those are my three favourites that I pulled out. Although, to be fair, there's so many great book covers. I mean, you've got this one here, you've got Circe, there's so many pretty books. Okay, last question, you'll be pleased to know. Modern foreign languages. Recommend a translated book that you enjoyed. Does anybody want to guess which book I'm about to hold up? Drum roll. If I could edit, I would insert one in here, but I can't. Tender as the Flesh by Augustina Bastarrica is my favourite translated book. Now, to be fair, I haven't read that many translated books, which is something I want to fix this year, but this is one that I read last year and it absolutely blew my socks off. I've talked about it loads. This is just, it's weird and it's gross and it's beautiful. It's a book about cannibalism, and I just completely loved it. And it's from an Argentinian author originally, so it's translated, and the translation I think is beautiful. You wouldn't notice that it's translated fiction, because I've read a few translated fiction books where it feels a little bit clunky, and I think it's the translation. This is just stunning and I really need to reread it soon. I've seen a few people on Booktube start to talk about it now. I mean, I picked it up as a recommendation from Harriet Rosie Reads, and then I've seen a few people start to read it. So I think it is starting to gain a little bit of traction, and I think it was in the Goodreads awards. It was shortlisted for the horror category, which I think is probably helping people pick it up. But if you can handle really visceral descriptions of cannibalism, then I would recommend that you pick this up, because it's one of those books where, yes, it's about cannibalism because it's set in a world where we can no longer consume animal flesh because of a virus. So again, it's another virus book. And so we have legalised eating human flesh. If you can handle that, it kind of, that's the premise, but to me it's more about loneliness and what it means to be human, and I just loved it. Also, the ending, I could have picked this for best ending, but I wanted to put it in for modern foreign languages, because the ending for this, like, yeah, I was really glad when some of my friends started to read it, because I was like, I need to talk about the ending. So yeah, this is my translated book that I really enjoyed. So finally, obviously it's a tag, so I'm asking you to tag 3 bookish friends who would make up your friendship group. Obviously, because this is a new tag, I'm going to tag more people than that, because hopefully people will do it and it will start to spread, because I'm so like intrigued to see what answers people come up with for this. So I've got my trusty notebook. So I'm going to tag Charlotte from Books and Bargains, obviously, Leanne from Literary Divergence, also obviously, Emma from Drinking by My Shelf, Chloe from Chloe Reads Books, Olivia Savannah from Olivia's Catastrophe, Amy from Amy Myers, Shannon from 155 Books, April from Getting Hooker With It, and Aoife from Words of Clover. So you guys are all tagged, and I really hope you do it. I'm really excited to see what you come up with. I will leave all of the questions in the description, plus any of the videos that I've mentioned, and anyone that I've mentioned will also be tagged. Please drop me a comment, let me know if you're going to do this. Also pick a question and just answer it for me in the comments so I can see some of the answers. Please subscribe if you would like more of this chaos, and I will see you in the next one. Thanks guys, bye!